An intelligent mortal who eventually obtained the powers of Thor, Jane Foster is a damsel in distress who transformed herself into a superhero. Created by Stan Lee and Larry Lieber to become Thor's love interest, Jane Foster first appeared in 1962 as a nurse, but then became a doctor, an astrophysicist, an Avenger, a cancer survivor, and a Valkyrie. Welcome to Vita Comics, and today let's review the heroic exploits of Jane Foster. When Jane was only 9 years old, her mother died of cancer. Nevertheless, her father gave her a happy childhood and worked 2 jobs to get her through medical school. However, her father died from a heart attack. She then became a nurse for Dr. Donald Blake, not knowing that Dr. Blake is the human identity of Thor. Blake fell in love with Jane, but Jane is very much infatuated with Thor. Loki then used Jane by making Thor choose between saving her or retrieving Mjolnir. When Thor saved Jane and reverted to his human identity, he was unable to retrieve Mjolnir and was trapped as Dr. Blake for some time. Thor eventually revealed his true identity to Jane in the hopes of winning her love. However, Odin the All-Father forbade Thor to marry Jane as she is only a mortal. Thor then brought Jane in Asgard to get Odin's approval for them to marry. Odin agreed, but with a condition of proving herself worthy to become an Asgardian goddess. Odin then gave Jane superhuman powers. However, Jane became confounded by these powers and failed Odin's test. Odin turned her back into a mortal being and removed her memories of Thor. Odin then sent Jane to work for Dr. Keith Kincaid, who later became her husband. Jane and Dr. Kincaid had a son named Jimmy, but they were later divorced. Odin reunited Thor with Sif, whom he had loved in the past. However, when Jane became very ill and was about to die, Sif used the rune staff of Kamotharn to infuse her own life force to Jane. Sif vanished, but Jane recovered, that also gave back her memories of Thor. The love between Thor and Jane revived, and she became strong as well when she captured Geirröður the Troll King. Subsequently, Jane accompanied Thor on several exploits, such as in Heliopolis, to an alternate future with Tomorrow Man, to the war-torn nation of Costa Verde, and to Asgard. In Asgard, Jane seemingly transformed into Sif. The Grand Vizier then theorized that Jane and Sif had become one being, with Sif as the dominant personality in Asgard and Jane the dominant one on Earth. Thor soon discovered that Sif and Jane are alternatingly being sent into another dimension through the rune staff. Thor and Sif then used the rune staff to release the beings trapped in the other dimension, including Jane. Jane eventually became a doctor and a consulting physician for Tony Stark. During the Civil War, she joined the Secret Avengers in treating many of its members. Soon, Jane traveled to Broxton, Oklahoma, the new city of Asgard, and opened a medical practice. When Thor lost the ability to wield the hammer Mjolnir after his battle against Nick Fury, Mjolnir was left on the moon unattended. Meanwhile, Jane was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent therapy. However, she refused magical treatments. Mjolnir telepathically sought out Jane, and she eventually gave in to the hammer's call and requested Heimdall to take her to the hammer's location. Once there, Jane picked up Mjolnir, and it transformed her into the new Thor and possessed Asgardian god powers. Since she had watched Thor use the hammer a lot of times, Jane easily learned how to use Mjolnir. Jane soon found herself fighting Malekith and the Frost Giants, while Thor demanding Mjolnir back, but he doesn't know that it's Jane behind the mask. Eventually, Thor accepted and gave his blessings to the new owner and began calling himself as Odin's son, as he gave the name Thor to her. Insulted that there's a stranger using Mjolnir, Odin commanded the destroyer to fight Jane. Odin's son and Freya then summoned the women who were suspected to be the new Thor to help Jane. Jane's identity as Thor remained a secret. In the Secret War series, Jane was one of the heroes who prevented the collision of 2 Earths and was transported to the Life Raft before arriving to Battleworld, a planet that exhibits aspects of the different universes impacted by the story arc. Jane then decided to infiltrate the Thor core to turn them against Doom, that then led to the restoration of the multiverse. Jane Foster will then represent Midgard in the Congress of Worlds, but her mortal self remained to be suffering from cancer. Apparently, her transformation into Thor also removes the chemo from her mortal body. As Thor, she got caught in a war between the Dark Elves and the Light Elves. With the help of Loki, she confronted Odin, who was now mad with power, and their battle spanned from Saturn to Jupiter. She then became a member of the Avengers once more. The Avengers are unaware of her identity until she got transferred into the future by Kang the Conqueror and got separated from Mjolnir. The new Captain America, Sam Wilson, saw this but kept it a secret. In the Secret Empire series, in spite of her illness, Jane helped Iron Man during Hydra's takeover of the United States of America. However, Madame Hydra enchanted Mjolnir that the alternate Captain America lifted it and banished Jane to another dimension. Upon waking up, Jane encountered Hekla, who created a makeshift hammer for her, and find Yod, who holds the device to send her back. Even without Mjolnir, Jane still helped in the final assault on DC to defeat Captain America. Then Mjolnir was given back to Jane after Hydra's defeat. Jane's cancer soon reached stage 4 that if she became Thor one last time, she would die. However, she learned that the city of Asgardia was flying towards the sun because of Mangog. She chose to become Thor one last time even if it killed her, and went on to fight Mangog. After some brutal beating, Jane tied Mangog to Mjolnir and hurled them to the sun, which killed Mangog and destroyed Mjolnir. After which, Jane shared one last kiss to Odin's son before transforming into her mortal form and died. Odin's son and Odin then channeled the god Tempest within Mjolnir to revive Jane. Jane lived and continued her chemotherapy, and Odin's son became Thor once more. Jane then became the temporary All-Mother when Queen Freya became busy destroying Malekith's Black Bifrost. Jane and Agent Solomon then led an attack in Antarctica against the forces of Roxxon. To help Thor, she picked up the broken pieces of Mjolnir from the Ultimate Universe and became Thor again. Jane joined Thor to rescue Odin and Freya from Malekith at Stonehenge. With her Mjolnir capable of only taking one more blow, Jane used it to knock out one of the eyes of King Lofi. The hammer fell apart but then recombined into a vambrace that covered her left arm. With the spirit of the fallen Valkyries, the vambrace also transformed her into the new Valkyrie. As Valkyrie, Jane has superhuman strength, speed, vision, depth perception, and mystical teleportation and artificial wings. Jane then rejoined the Avengers against Mephisto and the Council of Red.
What's it been like? 3-4 years?
8 years, 7 months, and 6 days, give or take.
In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, portrayed by Natalie Portman, Dr. Jane Foster is one of the world's leading astrophysicists and leading expert about Asgardian gods. In the first movie of Thor, while studying astronomical anomalies in New Mexico, Jane found Thor when he was banished by Odin from Asgard. She helped Thor get back to Asgard and fell in love with him. When the Bifrost broke, she got separated from Thor and S.H.I.E.L.D. hid him from Loki. In Thor: The Dark World, Jane was infested by the Aether, a force of destruction that the Dark Elves wanted to use to destroy the 9 realms. Thor brought Jane to Asgard and Odin tried to find ways to heal her. Malekith, leader of the Dark Elves, discovered the Aether in Jane and attacked Asgard. Malekith retrieved the Aether, but Thor and the team won in the end. Jane returned to work and Thor had decided to stay on Earth with her, but Jane ended their relationship soon after. During the snap of Thanos, Jane was one of the people who were wiped out but was returned after 5 years. Lastly, in Thor: Love and Thunder, Jane Foster became the wielder of the same Mjolnir that was destroyed by Hela in Thor Ragnarok movie, and Jane became Thor.
She's just my first bad guy.
In the animated world, Jane appeared in the Marvel Superheroes TV show of 1966, in the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes show of Disney XD in 2010 as a paramedic, and on the Season 4 of Avengers Assemble of Disney XD in 2017. Here, Jane appeared as Thor, voiced by Erika Lindbeck. When Jane was being swallowed by a quicksand and Thor is unable to save her, Thor threw Mjolnir into the quicksand and gave her the powers of Thor. She also destroys Battleworld and was given the name of Thunderstrike.
Whoever is worthy will possess the power